Ladies and gentlemen, this is huge. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. Politico. BBC apologizes to Trump for documentary, but pushes back on lawsuit. New York Times, The Guardian, it's all over the news now. A $1 billion lawsuit. This is why right here, President Trump will force a settlement right here. This is exactly why, in addition to the nationwide injunction victory and other victories by the Supreme Court, he wins over 93% of the time in the Supreme Court. But this is exactly why the BBC, like everyone else, ABC News, will have to settle with President Trump. Hit subscribe. Check this out. This right here is exactly why.
To demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. Lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Today we will see whether Republicans stand strong for integrity of our elections, but whether or not they stand strong for our country. Come to demand that
peacefully and patriotically. These are not the words of somebody who wants to foment a rebellion. You would have to be a complete imbecile to believe that. And if anyone edited, or any news organization edits or plays out of context the words peacefully and patriotically, these are not frightening or threatening words. These are words that are used to tone down any escalation. These are words used by President Trump. And hit subscribe to this channel right now. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel, and you'll see this on H.A. Goodman's other channel as well. Hit subscribe to both this channel, H.A. Goodman, and H.A. Goodman's other channel. This is why the BBC will cave and have to settle on the $1 billion. It won't be $1 billion that they give, but like ABC News, there will almost certainly be a settlement because of the following words that possibly were edited from their coverage of President Trump.
We'll soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Today we will
peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Peacefully and patriotically. And for the past 10 years, almost every time you heard a quote allegedly from President Trump, it was either edited or taken completely out of context or given the most sinister meaning. He never said both sides have fine people in the manner that was reported. That was a hoax. He was never a Kremlin operative. That was a hoax for years and years. People still believe that. All of the people who perpetuated these myths and hoaxes and fake news, they're either facing criminal indictments with a conspiracy statutes within a grand jury in Florida that we've talked about, or like ABC News and others, they've had and Facebook, Meta, they've had to pay millions of dollars in settlements. Let's get started. The Supreme Court sides with Trump administration on nationwide injunctions. That's going to help President Trump. But here you have a $1 billion lawsuit we'll get to in a second because of possible deceptive editing.
So 2 top BBC executives resigning as President Trump threatens a lawsuit over a documentary that he says misrepresented his remarks on January 6th. The BBC's version featured some of the president's remarks out of context, omitted references he made to, quote, march to the building peacefully and patriotically.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong. We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. Lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
Yeah, that's important. The president said, quote,
the first clip, apparently from the BBC, was ominous, with this kind of ominous mood, like theme music. Oh, Trump, he's such a despot. And this is the misinformation that Democrats hyperventilate about, and wonderful liberals throughout the planet are apoplectic about always. Oh my God, you're believing things that aren't true, as they perpetuate almost certainly things that are completely false, taken out of context. They create these myths surrounding President Trump. That's why ABC News, George Stephanopoulos, and others have had to pay defamation lawsuits to the tune of millions of dollars. To my super chat, thank you, by the way. Your support is greatly appreciated, but they lied about President Trump's words. He did not try to foment a rebellion. That's why the Supreme Court, and I should have put up not just the injunctions, the Supreme Court overruled the Colorado State Supreme Court. I should have 8-0. That's the Supreme Court case that completely undermines the BBC's coverage. The Supreme Court ruled unanimously that Trump should never be taken off a ballot because he did not foment a rebellion. He was never even accused of that in a court of law. And yet almost every publication on the planet tried to create this narrative. But let's continue. Hit subscribe if you're new.
To fight like hell, yeah, it was actually from a different portion of his remarks referencing election integrity. It's not even up for debate. Let's bring in editor-at-large of The Sun, Harry Cole. Harry, you wrote an editorial of what you did if you took over. But when you heard about this edit and you heard about the firing of 2 people who resigned or got kicked out, I imagine you weren't surprised.
It was the most remarkably brazen piece of editing. It wasn't as if they just, shortened one little quote in order to fit it into the documentary. They took 2 very distinctive half sentences, 40 minutes apart, and spliced them together in what could only be the most aggressive way to...
How do you take words 40 minutes apart? I mean, anyone could be defamed with that type of editing. Anyone on the planet could be defamed. You take words 40 minutes apart, completely missing context, to create this theatrical version of Trump. They wanted to create, almost certainly, not just the BBC, everyone at that time. Every publication at that time is guilty of defamation, almost certainly. Publications around the planet, including the United States, especially the U.S., wanted to paint Trump as a vile, sinister, despotic, authoritarian monster. And the Supreme Court unanimously ruled against the Colorado State Supreme Court when they tried to kick Trump off the ballot. Because you had very intelligent people who apparently know the Constitution in the Colorado State Supreme Court stating that Trump tried to foment a rebellion. Therefore, he's not eligible for the presidency. Of course, that was unanimously overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. I should have cited that instead of the nationwide injunctions, but the nationwide injunctions helped Trump as well. So BBC is going to almost certainly have to settle. Because as you just heard from this gentleman, 40 minutes apart, what would be the reasoning? What would be the reasoning, if not for defamation? What is the reasoning to use splices of Trump's speech 40 minutes apart? Your guess is as good as mine.
It wasn't as if they just, shortened one little quote in order to fit it into the documentary. They took 2 very distinctive half sentences, 40 minutes apart, and spliced them together in what could only be the most aggressive way to try and annoy Donald Trump. I mean, January 6th is a real bruise for him already. Then to sort of punch that bruise so nakedly on the eve of an election as a foreign media outlet, I mean, I'm not surprised that they're reaping what they sow. And from what I hear, they're preparing for one almighty grovel ahead of Friday's 5 o'clock deadline for legal action.
As you know, the president's had a lot of success going back at our media companies, and he takes the money that he wins, he's putting it towards his library. He's suing you guys. He's suing the BBC, government-sponsored television. BBC came back and said this about the edit. We accept that the way the speech was edited did give the impression of a direct call for violent action. The BBC would like to apologize for that.
So this is quite amusing. We accept that the way the speech was edited did give the impression of a direct call for violent action. It gave the impression because the speech was edited in that manner. We accept that the way the speech was edited did give the impression. Okay, the BBC would like to apologize for that error of judgment. Editing is, even on I barely edit on my YouTube segment. Editing in a movie or in a documentary or in any news, within any news organization, is a very strategic task. It's a task with specific objectives. You edit, especially if you're the BBC or if you are CNN, or you edit to convey a political objective, not the truth. If it's about the truth, you don't take one piece of a speech from one part of his speech and then 40 minutes later kind of connect it together to give the impression that he wants to call for mayhem and chaos. The reason almost certainly was that the BBC almost certainly wanted to portray Trump as a tyrant. That's why. This wasn't an accident. It's either that the editors for the BBC are completely inept and have no clue what they're doing, or they're very good at what they're doing and there was a specific political objective. I think the latter is more accurate.
Era of judgment, there is an increasing need for the public to be informed in a way that's impartial, truthful, and is based on evidence that they can trust. That is the sacred job of the BBC. That's what they say. But what is it like watching it every day? Do you think that they have that mantra to be fair and balanced?
No. I think they thought that Donald Trump wouldn't win. They were doing their utmost to stop that from happening by making this documentary on the eve of polls, and it's blown up in their faces. But this scandal, Donald Trump and that edit is the tip of the iceberg in a much wider scandal that is rocking the BBC. The BBC would quite like all the focus to be on the Trump thing, because it ignores the fact that in an independent report paid for by the BBC and then buried by the BBC for months, Michael Prescott, a former journalist who was brought in to look at standards across the BBC, found gross failings in their Arabic services, peddling Hamas propaganda day in, day out without checks. They've been wholesale taken over by the militant trans lobby, and they are pumping out we don't need to go through all the nonsense and garbage that we could come to expect, but it was taken as gospel. These were all in the same report. Right. The Trump stuff's getting the headlines, but actually the rot goes far, far deeper than that.
So, Harry, here's the thing. If Israel looks around, and they haven't been perfect, but they look around after October 7th, they take action. They wonder, why is their integrity, why is their profile dropping? It's because there's a collusion among these networks to do the same thing, whether it's protests on the campuses blaming Israel or in New York City, or it's networks like and corporations like the BBC making sure the Palestinians look like the victims here, not the Israelis.
Absolutely, and it's victim blaming, essentially. It's taking the gospel of the so-called, Gaza-run health ministry, the Hamas health ministry, as if they can do no wrong and anything they say is true without verifying it, yet everything that Israel say is greeted with a much heftier dose of skepticism or even just ignored. Now, I don't think this is it's tricky. Your gut instinct says this must be deliberate, or is it the fact that these organizations are staffed with younger, liberal people who genuinely cannot see this bias? And that's, I think, the problem the BBC has, is that at the moment, the people at the top have been trying to call some of this out.
So this gentleman is 100% right. It's almost certain that there are no supporters of President Trump. Nobody at the BBC or the Washington Post or CNN or MSNBC or The Guardian are going into the office with a Make America Great Again hat. It's not happening. It ain't happening. It's just not taking place. If you work at The Guardian or the New York Times or the Washington Post or the BBC or CNN or MSNBC, and you walk into the office with a red Make America Great Again hat and you say, look, I've had a change of heart. I think tariffs will bring back manufacturing. I think that immigration law should be enforced, and I don't want a never-ending military conflict. I want to vote for Trump. You will be fired almost certainly. Your days of employment at these wonderful, morally superior outlets will be numbered, almost certainly. Virtually everyone at major publications and major cable stations and news organizations around the world, I don't say everybody like as a fact. I say, it's hyperbolic, but virtually everyone in any, capacity of influence, whether they're journalists or editors or writers or directors or producers or anchors, almost all are liberal or on the liberal side of the political spectrum within their respective countries, especially in the U.S. So their viewpoint is exactly why most people around the world and most Americans do not trust media. Media, by and large, nationwide in the U.S. and globally, has been a mouthpiece for one political side, left of center. That's not about the truth. That's about pushing a political agenda or objective.
People have been saying there's something deeply wrong here, and the reaction from BBC staff is to hound out anyone who's vaguely conservative from the organisation, proving their liberal bias by sort of going on this witch hunt on anyone that calls them out for it. It's almost Kafkaesque, and they're in a doom loop if they can't get a grip on this soon. And crucially, as you mentioned there, it isn't an ordinary media organisation. When Donald Trump sues the BBC, he's suing licence fee payers. You go to prison, you are threatened with a criminal sanction if you continually refuse to pay your TV tax in the UK. And so that money won't be coming from a corporation, it won't be coming from shareholders, it'll be coming from British people. And that's why this row is so toxic, because it gets into the diplomacy of the special relationship in Britain, because it's hardworking Brits that are going to have to pay the price for this one.
Harry, and you were an editorial of what you would do if you took over. It's definitely worth reading, worth reading your columns. Thanks so much for making
Brian.
it so black and white. We truly appreciate it. You have a generation got trained by these people, now work for the BBC. Thanks so much. Thanks, Harry.
So I really should. The injunctions will help President Trump, but really I should have put up the Supreme Court unanimously overturning the Colorado ban. Okay, that is a far that will help Trump enormously in proving that the BBC was deceptive, deliberately and maliciously deceptive. Because the Supreme Court, the Colorado State Supreme Court, and again, I should have put that up, but I'm going to talk about it really quickly. The Colorado State Supreme Court, as we all know, tried to ban and kick Trump off the ballot. They tried to say that he fomented a rebellion and he called for violence. Therefore, he's not eligible to become president. Therefore, he cannot be on the ballot in Colorado. They wanted to set a precedent nationwide so other states could kick Trump out of office. Okay, that was unanimously overturned. And although the nationwide injunctions will also help President Trump with this lawsuit against the BBC, that is the direct that Supreme Court decision, the unanimous decision overturning the Colorado ban, ballot ban, is directly correlated to why the BBC will almost certainly lose their case against Trump. Check this out.
Side-by-side comparison, you will see the difference between the BBC's documentary about the president compared to the raw, unedited clips of Trump's speech that day.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
And so what are they going to say about the theme music? What are they going to say about the ominous, scary, frightening music, or, that kind of ominous tone as Trump is speaking? It's like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. It's like a horror movie. Oh my God, Trump is speaking and it's this ominous tone. Was that also a coincidence? Was that all? What was the political objective? When Biden speaks, whenever you can make out what he's saying, I mean, it would be the equivalent of like, those like bouncing balls and like, like when Biden speaks. Okay. But like when Biden speaks or when President Obama or when Harris or when Hillary Clinton speaks, that the ominous tone is like actually like, that would be warranted. Not, some people might say, not me, but some people might say the ominous tone would be warranted if Clinton, had a speech during a speech. But anyway, the point is, the BBC never does this to Democrats. Where is the example? And the rebuttal is, oh, well, Chuck Schumer, he threatened the Supreme Court years back. And then somebody tried to take the life of Brett Kavanaugh, Justice Kavanaugh. Where was the documentary on that? So there are a number of examples of Democrats giving speeches. Oh, one Democrat said that her constituents should get in the faces of Trump supporters. There are Democrats that talked about trying to physically assault President Trump. Where are any of these documentaries on Democrats that make these egregious statements? You won't find them because there's a political objective. But let's continue.
After this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
We're going to cheer on. BBC viewers who didn't hear that peacefully and patriotically walk. We didn't, BBC viewers didn't. And so then you have viewers in, let's say, the closest ally we have, the UK, seeing the same thing that the morally superior liberals, Democrats see here. And it's this view of President Trump that does not exist. It's completely fabricated.
Trump's lawyers wrote to the BBC threatening to sue for $1 billion in damages unless the BBC issues a retraction and compensates him. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt got just one question on this topic in Wednesday's briefing, and she said that a lawsuit is now in the works.
The president has made it very clear that this is a leftist propaganda machine that is unfortunately subsidized by British taxpayers. I think that the president was deeply concerned by the editing, the purposeful and dishonest editing of his speech that was so clearly fake news. And he rightfully dubbed that term many years ago. And this is a classic example of that. We see it in the United States all the time. We see it now in the United Kingdom. As you know, the president's external legal counsel has filed a lawsuit against the BBC.
Now, Australia's TV broadcaster ABC is being accused by Sky News of doctoring a similar edit of Trump's speech in 2021, much to the same tune as the BBC. See for yourself.
And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness.
Australia's ABC is now in damage control mode, quote, comparing the BBC's Panorama program to the ABC's Four Corners program is opportunistic and false, they say. The grab on Four Corners was used accurately by the program. The editing did not change the meaning of that section of the speech and did not mislead the audience.
The editing did not change the meaning? Well, then why was it edited to begin with? If the editing did not change the meaning of the speech, what was the meaning of the speech? If the meaning of the speech is subject to interpretation. So that's a very bizarre way of defending editing that could be viewed as deceptive.
The program was consistent with the ABC's high standards of factual, accurate, and impartial storytelling. Paul, we know that in the United States, where this lawsuit's going to be, it's in the jurisdiction of Florida, you have to prove actual malice. So either an intent to spread false information or reckless disregard for the truth. By omitting peaceful and patriotic, which is exactly
There go through social media accounts. President Trump's lawyers already have screenshots of every social media account, almost certainly of every publication they plan to sue or station. They have social media statements. Trump is a menace to the world and to the universe. There's no malice. Well, we edited it was for truth. They have social media posts. They have perhaps a money trail to specific political groups that are on the left within these respective countries. They have possible coordination between Democrats and the publications in question. Jimmy Kimmel, for example, possibly, potentially, like the Honorable James Comey says, potentially, commits campaign finance violation every single night when he, goes on his tirades against Trump. So his Trump derangement syndrome monologues potentially, possibly, and I'm not accusing Kimmel or his writers or producers or whatever, but if they're coordinating or communicating in any way, shape, or form with Democrats or Democratic Party operatives, that's free campaign donations. That's political. These are political contributions because it's free advertising, and that's against Federal Election Commission laws. So anyway, let's continue.
exactly what Trump says. It seems like reckless disregard.
It does. So this is what happens when you don't have a First Amendment-based society. You and I have made this point before on the air. The First Amendment, there's a reason the First Amendment is first. It's the foundation of our system, right? UK and Australia. Australia follows the UK model a lot more, does not have it. As a result, what do you get? Well, you get stuff like this. And the way they try to police it is to make their defamation laws very draconian. That's the problem for them in this instance. Trump's suit has merit. And the problem for them is that the damages in the UK and Australian systems are a hammer. Everybody has read those stories. You don't have the malice, as you said. And here's the other key thing with them. The burden of proof is on the defendant. Here, it's much, much higher. So it's a lower bar, heavier damages. And this is what happens to expand the playing field. This is what happens when you don't have a First Amendment and you also have government media, right? We've talked about it relative to NPR. Government shouldn't be in media of this sort. And that confluence is what creates situations like this. This is UK deep state stuff. The case has merit. That's why they're all in damage control mode, because he's suing for $1 billion. That's not going to be the amount. But they're going to take a real hit here unless they work this out.
And Emily, there's always the option that the BBC would settle. We have seen other news outlets do that.
Sure. And I sort of want to walk viewers through to what exactly is going on for those that have questions about suing a foreign entity on our soil. So the argument, as you said, it's willful, deceitful editing, intentional, and that's important because it goes to the actual malice standard. But President Trump is arguing, look, not only am I a resident of Florida, but you broadcast amplified online to streaming here in the state of Florida, and therefore it touches me. Now, note that that's going to be one of the defenses that the BBC says, which is, look, we're not even on your soil. But I think the important thing here is that while they are arguing, well, the substance is still there, materially it means the same thing. The reality is that his two statements were 54 minutes apart, and splicing together non-adjacent statements.
54 minutes apart. I mean, that's not just editing. That's almost certain malice that's almost certainly a malicious attempt at deliberately altering one's speech, Trump's speech, to convey a specific political objective. The political objective was to paint Trump as a monster who wanted to foment chaos and mayhem, which is why the Supreme Court overruled the Colorado State Supreme Court's ban on Trump. The Supreme Court sides with President Trump 93% of the time, while federal courts side with Democrats 80% of the time. But the federal judges are they're constantly ruling in an unconstitutional manner. Democrats are routinely on the unconstitutional side or the wrong side of history because they keep getting struck down by the Supreme Court. the Supreme Court sides with President Trump over 93% of the time. Over 93% of the time. And whether it's the injunctions or the Colorado State Supreme Court getting overruled by the U.S. Supreme Court and stating, yeah, Trump has to be on every ballot. He didn't foment a rebellion. This is the type of thing like wonderful, morally superior liberals or people who are left of center in every wonderful, the U.S., UK, Australia. These are beautiful, amazing people. But oftentimes they believe things that are not true because they're fed propaganda with a speech that's edited utilizing two phrases 50 minutes apart. 50 minutes apart.
That clearly convey a different meaning than his patriotic, peacefully making your voices heard statement, which was the crux and the point of his commentary, is totally materially misleading. And in the president's argument, not only massive reputational harm, but he points out you guys dropped this a week before the presidential elections. And he argues that they thereby materially impacted the outcome of the elections. Final quick point, there's a statute of limitations situation here, but I'm fully confident, even if they settle, but I hope they don't, because this is the kind of thing that I think the culture in the UK and Australia have been allowed to sort of run unfettered with a massively gossipy and untrue, rabid press corps. And I think here they have finally met their match that says, not on my watch.
And to the point, it's being funded by the citizens of the United Kingdom who have to pay a fee to the BBC. Harris, there was an internal document that took place at the BBC. There's a man named Michael Prescott. He was an independent advisor to the BBC's Editorial Guidelines and Standards Board. The Telegraph obtained this internal document. And here is what this document said, according to the Telegraph. The document, written by former journalist Michael Prescott, sent to the BBC board, exposes a string of incidents that demonstrates serious apparent bias in the corporation's reporting. They include evidence that BBC Panorama doctored a speech by Trump. It also highlights serious problems with BBC Arabic's reporting on Gaza, in which it apparently gives extensive space to the views of Hamas. Oh, wait. And elsewhere, he raises concerns that a unit of rogue LGBT plus reporters are censoring coverage of the trans debate. The bias runs deep.
Well, look, there's no accountability that they've probably ever had to face. And what Emily was talking about is so true. The UK population there, they're not going to pipe up about this. I mean, they're looking at this as fodder, political kind of entertainment anyway. It's happening in the United States, and it doesn't really go counter to what their politics en masse have been shown to be. But the problem with a license fee and a royal charter, that's state-run media.
Yep.
I mean, you've already kind of entered the gates on that. And if the state of people are not going to keep that government in check, well, then who does it? Well, I guess in this case, it's going to be President Trump and his attorneys, external attorneys from the White House looking at this saying, you can't do this. So I would say this, though, about the Australia situation, because I thought that statement was really interesting. They said why it was not an infraction to use material from 54 minutes away and hook it up with other material. Journalism 101 says chronological, yes, but not that far apart.
So today's the
Okay, so they say why they don't feel like that's a problem, but they don't tell us why they felt the need to do it. And I think we need.
Exactly. What was the point? So then they can't. You can circumvent the honest truth for just so long before you have to actually decide whether to tell the truth or lie, by omission or overtly lie. So when they say, well, the meaning still stayed the same. Well, no, it didn't. Why did they feel the need to deceptively edit? Because that's deceptive editing. 50 minutes apart. You couldn't. How on earth could you possibly, even within a speech, take one phrase and then couple it with another phrase 50 minutes later or 40 minutes or even 10 minutes later? How could that even convey any truth?
Need to know that. I think Trump's attorneys will get to that. It's like, well, if it wasn't going to change the meaning, it didn't look like it would really change the length that much. And in television, sometimes that can be why you edit down. But you are tight and very meticulously careful about the time between when someone said something and when someone said something else and putting those things together. That's all part of our journalism accountability and expectation for the truth to the public. I think they don't win this. I hope they don't settle, because I'd like to see the battle, because it's worth fighting. I think they'll settle. I think they know they can't win.
The discovery, and they get into discovery, and they look at all of those emails. That's what they don't want.
Exactly. I think they don't want that.
I do want to bring in a voice that says the
There's no way that the BBC or CNN or any of these organizations want their internal discussions about how they despise Trump or how they need to make Trump's speech, more frightening or more ominous. There's no way that they get to that, because then there are those emails almost certainly have their email chains almost certainly that talk about other topics where they only give not only biased coverage that a specific political agenda or objective, where they cater to a specific ideology.
BBC tries so ever hard. It is Brian Stelter. Let's listen to his take on this.
In a vacuum, this really bad edit by an outside production company would not cause heads to roll at the very top of the BBC. But the network exists in an incredibly politically charged environment, even as it tries to be apolitical and impartial.
They try so.
So that was the usual complete nonsense. It's a politically charged environment because publications deceptively edit Trump's speeches. And it was when Democrats are, Trump is so divisive. Yeah, you've lied about everything he's done for 10 years. So people believe the lies and they get angry. Maybe if you reported the truth, it would be less interesting, but it would be truthful. Like Trump didn't say both sides have fine people, referring to 1930s and 1940s Germans. That publication lied, and everyone that ever stated that lied. And then The Atlantic says, Trump called fallen Americans, insulted fallen Americans. There's zero evidence of that. Journalism has become hearsay and gossip as long as it's leveled against Trump. If Republicans said Biden said the same thing, oh my God, where's the evidence? So, and it's the same thing with accusations. Accusations leveled against Democrats, oh, where's the evidence? Accusations leveled against Republicans, well, you got to believe it.
So hard to be apolitical and impartial, Caroline.
I want to give viewers a sense of the British media landscape. So I frequently write for The Telegraph, which is one of the few conservative-leaning publications in England that doesn't believe that Trump is a dictator and an authoritarian. And to your point, Kaylee, they actually released the dossier that found that the BBC deceptively edited that speech to suggest that Trump was inciting a riot. Deeply dishonest. And it is worth restating that the BBC is kind of like the equivalent of NPR and PBS in the United States, in that they are taxpayer funded, but they claim impartiality and they claim neutrality, but they regularly toe the progressive line. That's just not consistent. It's also not representative of the British public, I would argue, many of whom actually lean conservative. We saw those huge protests after Charlie Kirk's assassination in London showing a conservative upswell of support. But it's worth stating that the BBC's record of bias is long-standing. It goes beyond Trump. Just a few examples. They were found to have reprimanded a host who tried to change a script that said originally pregnant people into pregnant women. So she got a slap on the wrist for actually changing that to reflect biological reality. So the BBC engages in gender ideology doublespeak. In addition to that,
again, here's the thing. Who would be offended by that? I mean, we understand. I get it. I get the political rebuttal, but how many Democrats, how many liberals in the UK or liberals in the US would be offended by simply saying pregnant women? Who is the individual on this planet offended by that? Why? And why would that be offensive? I still haven't wrapped my head around it, nor do I talk about those topics on the channel, but why on earth would that be offensive to anybody? To anybody. But let's continue.
They were involved in a pretty serious editorial scandal where they forgot to disclose that the teenage narrator of one of their documentaries was actually the son of a Hamas official. So their anti-Israel bias is pretty well documented. And that just goes to show you, not impartial, not neutral.
Oh, but they try so hard, and they have a great defender in Brian Stelter. Good for him.
Hey, everyone.
BBC News CEO is insisting the organization is not biased despite stepping down amid a growing scandal over a Trump documentary.
Todd Pyro has the details. That omission, peacefully protest, they forgot to put that in his speech.
Yeah, kind of a key word, Ainsley.
Correct.
Good morning again to all three of you. The British Broadcast Corporation, BBC, getting into some big hot water over this clip of Trump's speech January 6, 2021, featured in a documentary which critics say was misleading because, as Ainsley just alluded to, it left out the president urging.
Also, a documentary is meant to, in this case, like a documentary on politics, is meant to push a specific political objective. Now, the great Christopher Hitchens used to say that just because you're partisan doesn't mean you're not right, or that doesn't mean you're wrong. You could be partisan and, on the side of truth and history, justice, whatever. But if you're pushing a political objective and your goal is to convince your viewers that Trump is a madman, and to do so, you have to take words from one part of a speech and then connect those words to a phrase or another part of a speech 50 minutes away from the original statement. So the words that were edited were 50 minutes apart to make it seem like Trump was stating that he wanted to just take over the planet. And again, you edit for a specific purpose. In a court of law, they're not going to be able to circumvent why they edited within a documentary that had a specific political objective. A political documentary has a political agenda. Okay? So, that's any documentary, left or right, has if it's political in nature, has a political objective or agenda. The editing correlates to that agenda or objective.
Supporters to protest peacefully.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen. And
TBJ, thank you for the super chat. Thank you, TBJ. Yes. And again, words like cheer on or peacefully or patriotically, and Democrats did the same. They tried to impeach him they tried to create, if you just reported on President Trump honestly, there wouldn't be any hysteria. It would be a lot more boring. And if you just report on Trump honestly, it's a discussion about tariffs, immigration, foreign policy, and that's it. It's not this hysterical, apoplectic tirade that always is associated with criticism of President Trump from morally superior individuals. If the BBC or CNN or others reported on President Trump without this type of editing, they would simply say, okay, he was upset and he wanted to go to court and see if he lost fair and square to Biden. That's it. End of story. But no, he tried to foment a rebellion. He was a Kremlin operative first. He said both sides have fine people. Oh, he's a menace. And so this is all nonsense. That's why he was elected twice. That's why after Biden's 4 years, when we suffered through 4 years of Biden, with prices going 21% higher and interest rates exponentially higher, mortgage rates over double what they were, from like 3% or so in 2018 to over 7% at one point. And then people can't afford homes and they say, well, gosh, the working class, I'm going to vote for Mamdani. It's like, well, Under Biden, interest rates were exponentially increased because, oh, that's right, inflation was rampant, which hurts the working class that socialists claim to love. But anyway, let's continue.
And women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
Trump's lawyers writing to the BBC saying he would sue for $1 billion in damages unless the BBC issues a retraction and compensates him.
I think I have an obligation to do it because you can't allow people to do that. I couldn't allow 60 Minutes. You know, we settled that one for many millions of dollars, and I couldn't have allowed that to take place. They changed the answer that Kamala gave. They took out the entire answer and they put another answer in.
BBC's CEO of News, Deborah Turnus, has resigned in the wake of the scandal, but brushed off reporters earlier this week, standing by the media outlet's work.
Of course our journalists aren't corrupt. Our journalists are hard-working people who strive for impartiality, and I will stand by their journalism.
BBC's Director General Tim Davie has also resigned. As for the suit, a spokesperson for the BBC says they're reviewing the letter from Trump's team. BBC Chair Samir Shah has also apologized for, quote, an error of judgment over the edit.
They should apologize for their coverage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in Gaza, too. Thanks so much, Todd.
But to leave out peacefully and patriotically protest, I mean, that is the whole point right there.
Who's the editor? Adam Schiff?
Right.
Well, and a similar thing happened with the Kamala interview.
Yeah.
They edited that interview.
But the edits are always...
That was a different network.
And then the 60 Minutes Kamala Harris interview, they had to, because if you don't edit, if you're CBS or BBC, people vote Trump. You have to edit. You have to edit Kamala Harris's statements. Otherwise, it's just word salad, and people are like, what are you talking about? I'm voting Trump. And if the BBC didn't edit Trump's speech, then viewers would have to say, oh, he said peacefully and patriotically. He said cheer on, senators. That doesn't sound. So now this is what the BBC doesn't want.
Breaking news, ABC News and George Stephanopoulos have reached a settlement with President-elect Trump in his defamation lawsuit. The network agrees to pay $15 million as a charitable contribution to Trump's presidential library. ABC and Stephanopoulos will also issue statements of regret as an editor's note to the March 2024 article and television segment that prompted Trump to file the lawsuit earlier this year. Trump sued Stephanopoulos after he asserted in an interview that Trump was found, quote, liable for rape in a civil case, despite the fact that a jury actually determined Trump was liable for, quote, sexual abuse, which has a distinct definition under New York law.
And it's important to note that was a civil case. These crimes are criminal. These are criminal cases, okay, for those crimes, which, by the way, I think capital punishment should be, correlated to. But if, of course, Democrats are against that, but then cheered the murder of Charlie Kirk. So they're all over the place all the time. But anyway, let's continue.
Wants to get a hide out of the BBC, potentially now. Wall Street Journal, the bias meltdown at the BBC. It's a warning to Western democracies not to let the government control news production, which is the difference between what's happening in the UK and what happens here at home. I don't know how you remedy this, Mark. Like, what do you think they do?
Well, I think Trump is remedying it by suing them. And I think he's 100% right. This was incredible journalistic malpractice. And this was even worse than what CBS did with the Kamala Harris quote, because this wasn't simply taking a quote and editing it down in order to make it seem different than it was. They literally spliced together things he said an hour apart in order to make it seem like he was saying something he wasn't. So that was intentional. It was not just bad editing. And, and by the way, the BBC has a pattern of doing this. They were just sanctioned by the British government for this Gaza documentary they had where they mistranslated. Every time the Gazans referred to Jews, they referred to them as Israeli forces. So when a Gazan woman was saying, Hamas is committing jihad against Jews, they translated into Hamas is fighting Israeli forces. and they failed to disclose that the narrator was the son of a Hamas official. So the BBC is a very sick organization, and I think Donald Trump might bring some sanity to it.
Okay, another follow-up on this. The media settlements have been significant thus far. On screen, number 4, guys. YouTube, $24.5 million. Meta, $25 million. X, $10 million. Paramount Global, which is CBS News.
So you could take a screenshot right here of this, Trump's media settlements. And you're looking at, approaching what? $100 million already. The $16 million from CBS, that was a good one. And also ABC. But I mean, you're talking about such deceptive editing. You're talking about, and then you can add the BBC upcoming settlement almost certainly. They don't want discovery and emails and whistleblowers and, they don't want all of that. This is the thing, from James Comey to the BBC to the Steele dossier. Everyone knows they're setting up and framing Trump and trying to lie by omission or lie overtly with media coverage. Everyone knows this. Even almost certainly the publications that say, God, we shouldn't have edited, but we stand by our journalism. They know. The whole world knows. It's what and love the UK. It's what George Orwell called verbal refuse. Euphemisms, verbal refuse. The journalism has become what Orwell said, public relations. I believe he used that term for journalism that isn't journalism. It's public relations. And when they banned Trump, by the way, on every platform because people lied about his statements. And so this is a lot of money. This is only the tip of the iceberg. Trump is going to continue to sue anyone that lies about his words, which will make the playing field like more even. I mean, these publications, not the ones on the screen here, but publications throughout the world have lied, including especially the U.S., have lied with impunity for about a decade. And now it's President Trump's turn to hold people accountable.
On CBS News, $16 million. Then Disney with ABC at $16 million. Here is what the White House is asking for, Mark. They want a retraction, they want an apology, and they want an appropriate financial compensation. How do you define appropriate?
He's 100% correct.
Yeah, I get it, but what's the appropriate amount after the millions that I just showed you?
Something along the lines of what those others have done. He's asking for $1 billion. He'll take tens of millions, and that's perfectly fine. Look, what Trump is doing here is actually, in a way, saving the media, because
Let's say Trump gets 10 million. I'm just hypothetical, or BBC could fight it and pay nothing and win. Let's just say BBC is innocent, not guilty of anything, and Trump is wrong for having, gone back in time and said things 50 minutes apart, in the documentary. Or let's just say that BBC, let's say I'm wrong or you're wrong or we're all wrong or President Trump is wrong and the BBC is right and they win the lawsuit, which, okay, is possible. But that's possible. But if they lose the lawsuit, it's likely going to be 15 million, because Trump doesn't need the money. He wants to dissuade. He wants to ensure that other companies and publications and journalists don't do the same thing. So $15 million is a lot of money. 10 million is a lot of money. So if you had the major networks, and you just saw 25, 15, he gets 10 to 15 million from BBC. He's going to say, okay, instead of $1 billion, you get 10 million. You settle for 10 million, possibly, potentially. But the message that sends is, oh, you can't lie about J.D. Vance. Good luck if you're the BBC settling for 10 or 20 million or whatever, and then trying to do the same thing with J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio in 28. See, this is a devastating. All of these settlements are devastating for media. Because what's propping up the Democratic Party in the U.S. and, maybe liberal parties in other countries? This conglomerate of media narrative. But when you can't lie about a political side any longer, then you have to report just the truth. And if reporting just the truth is not sensationalized and actually just, helps conservatives because, they have a point too, that maybe they're actually right on topics, then that's yet another, disaster for liberals everywhere. Reporting the truth without editing is a disaster for liberals everywhere.
Trust in the media has absolutely plummeted. If you look at the Edelman Trust Barometer in 2025, which they asked 70% of people believe journalists and reporters purposely try to mislead people by saying things they know are not true or false exaggerations. And 67% said most news organizations are more concerned with supporting a political ideology than informing the public. That's 7 in 10 people around the world listening to these news organizations believe that. We're never going to get trust in the media, and we're never going to have a common set of facts if the media doesn't stop this blatant political bias.
Well, it's not often that you see two of the top leaders of the news organization step down. And
that's why you have these apoplectic tirades from very morally superior, highly educated liberals or progressives or leftists. It could be in the US, UK, Australia, anywhere. And they're beautiful people, oftentimes wonderful human beings. Seriously, I know very wonderful, beautiful human beings who disown me or, ruin Thanksgiving dinner or get-togethers because of this emotional tirade against Trump. And it's because of lies. And lies by omission, overt lies, deceptive editing, journalism that is really public relations or advocacy for one political side. And if you go to bed at night with Jimmy Kimmel, you wake up with the ladies at The View, you read the Washington Post or New York Times, and you watch CNN and MSNBC, your entire world is Trump is evil. And and the cognitive dissonance, you add cognitive dissonance and tribalism, you can't possibly understand why anyone votes Trump. Because the viewpoint, it's the Trump supporter is like the protagonist in a John Hughes movie. An 80s John Hughes, like all the cool kids are voting Democrat. What's wrong with you, man? And it's like the individual, the loner, the protagonist, and eventually gets the girl or wins the day in the John Hughes movie in the 80s. Okay, but like this kind of groupthink, going back to George Orwell, this groupthink, well, you can't possibly vote Trump because everything I've ever heard is that Trump is bad. Well, yeah, you've watched deceptively edited documentaries or news coverage. Every journalist you read is a lifelong Democrat that wants to lie by omission. Every anonymous source, according to U.S. former and current U.S. officials, this is all complete nonsense. When The Atlantic said that Trump disparaged fallen Americans, there was not one shred of evidence. Not a video, not audio tape, not nothing. But then with John Brennan said, it rings true. The Steele dossier rings true. Any lie about Trump would ring true to somebody that despises him. But anyway, let's continue.
Sky News is alleging that the Australian Broadcast Corporation also deceptively edited President Trump's January 6th speech, and they claim the edit was in the Australian ABC's Four Corners program on Trump's final days in office. Here's the allegedly edited clip in question.
And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
And here's the president's actual speech.
And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
So Jonathan Turley, GW law professor and Fox News contributor, we just got this statement, so I'm going to read it off my phone here. This is from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and the Four Corners program. Comparing the BBC's Panorama program to the ABC's Four Corners program is opportunistic and false. The grab on Four Corners was used accurately by the program. The editing did not change the meaning of that section of the speech and did not mislead the audience.
Did not change the meaning, but the words were, now we're talking about ABC and BBC and, okay, but how could why would you edit if not to change the meaning? That's the question here. You edit from different parts of a speech for a specific objective. What is the objective? Truth? Do you edit a speech to make it more truthful? And how on earth would altering words that were actually stated make those words more truthful? It's like saying, I'm going to take your speech and move the words around, and this way the meaning won't change.
The program was consistent with the ABC's high standards of factual, accurate, and impartial storytelling. Let me turn over to you, and what do you think about their defense?
Well, Dana is consistent with their standards, and those standards are abysmal. It's clearly misleading the way they edited that segment. And we've seen this for years. Many of us have been writing about it, objecting to it. We saw the J6 committee do this routinely. So they would, in all of these hearings, they would cut out the president saying, we're going to go there peacefully. And there's two parts of this speech that are routinely edited out by the media. One is his statement that we're going to go there peacefully. The other is his statement that we're going to go there to cheer on our allies. And both of them do not fit with this narrative. And it just so happens they
did this with Kyle Rittenhouse also. They said, well, he brought a firearm, and therefore, because he did so, that enraged people and that caused chaos and mayhem. But the people that were chasing him, two of them, I believe, had firearms of their own. And then the people chasing him, one of whom had a long criminal history, from what I remember, a sinister criminal history. I think the other one did too. But you could see the young man is actually being chased. And still, people at that time said, no, he was the aggressive or the belligerent here. And it's like there are beautiful, amazing, wonderful, awesome people who are leftists, socialists, whatever. They are beautiful. There are beautiful human beings. I'm not saying that because you disagree with me, you're not a good person. There can be wonderful, amazing, good people. Okay, that perhaps have a viewpoint that I disagree with. But if two people of opposing political views look at a man being chased and say the man who's being chased is the belligerent, society at that point was so indoctrinated, it was unbelievable. Let's continue.
Are routinely cut out. And, the fact is the BBC did see two of their top people resign. I for full disclosure, I used to be a BBC legal analyst. But the fact is when you look at the BBC segment and this segment, it's hard to believe that anyone could have edited that without acknowledging that they were changing the thrust of his comments.
So Caroline Leavitt was asked about this yesterday at the White House briefing, and she talked about the BBC in particular. Watch.
The president was deeply concerned by the editing, the purposeful and dishonest editing of his speech that was so clearly fake news. The president's external legal counsel has filed a lawsuit against the BBC. We expect that to continue, and whether they apologize or not is up to them.
And The Guardian is reporting that the BBC is considering an apology, saying that given an apology for the edit has been made by the BBC's chair, senior figures see no reason why a more personal apology cannot be made to the president in his official response to the legal.
So the Washington Post has apologized, retracted, CNN has apologized, BBC, Guardian apologized, everyone's apologizing. Well, what are they apologizing for? Well, the apology is a lie by omission as well. They're not admitting why they acted in the manner. All of these apologies are linked to specific, political objectives. And everybody knows, like Louis Gohmert, when he was questioning an FBI agent, Strzok, stated about people who went after Trump, he said, you know you're lying, we know you're lying, you know that we know you're lying, and yet the lies still continue. Something along those lines. So everyone knows why. Everyone knows that certain publications will always oppose Trump. And they will do so with either lies by omission, overt lies, or completely biased coverage. Then they'll say, we're objective and apolitical. And it's like, but now these publications have to pay money if they actually defame and deliberately try to harm politically President Trump.
Threat. Would an apology be enough here, or do you think that this external lawsuit the president is filing will continue?
I'm not just sure it will be enough. If you look at some of the past lawsuits that have been filed, an apology is certainly warranted here. And it's also important for them to remove the original edit from the internet version of this segment. So they need to make sure that they corrected it.
But that's the thing. When these headlines are published or when the documentaries are released, you have millions of people who read the headline or and then they're already convinced of a narrative or of a viewpoint. Very few people who have been initially convinced will say, oh, the BBC had to pay him. Oh, okay. Of all the people who first watched that documentary, what percentage will know that potentially the BBC settles with Trump? What percent? 20, 30, 40? Who knows?
In some meaningful way. There's an irony here, Dana, because usually there's an advantage. I teach defamation, and there's an advantage for plaintiffs to bring defamation cases in England. It's a much better jurisdiction to bring that type of case than the United States. It's one of the differences between two systems that are very close in terms of our common law. But you really can't bring this case right now because of the time passage in England. So the advantages probably rest with BBC if this were to go to trial in the United States, because we have a robust standard protecting the media. And as a public official, President Trump will have to prove what's called actual malice, so that they knew the falsehood of their statement or showed reckless disregard as to the.
That could be proven by asking the editors why they edited two different parts of a speech 50 minutes apart.
Falsehood. Now, there's certainly evidence that can be used here, but it's an awfully high standard.
Yep, a high bar to clear. Jonathan Turley, thanks. That's great to see.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you can't, if you're part of a news organization or a publication, or if you're a pundit, you can't lie about Trump anymore without getting sued for defamation, which should have taken place years ago. It should have taken place years ago, but thank God the political climate, the winds have completely changed. President Trump, like a phoenix, has, been resurrected from the ashes and, is now unstoppable, thank God. And we needed that because with all of this editing and all the lies, he still won again after 4 years of Biden. So what does that tell you? Anyway, hit subscribe. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right now.